Hi, my name is Monique Collins, and I will be doing a brief presentation on the author Mark Twain. Mark Twain was born as Samuel Langhorne Clemens in Florida, Missouri in 1835. His father was a Virginia lawyer, but his family grew up relatively poor. In 1839, the family moved to Hannibal, Missouri, and after his father died in 1847, he left school and became an apprentice in a printing shop owned by his brother Orion, and he became a licensed pilot in his 20s. In 1861, he left for the Nevada Territory with Orion and did journalism. He was a reporter with the Virginia City Territorial Enterprise and continued the career with the San Francisco Morning Call. Mark Twain's literary fame is believed to have begun in 1865 when one of his works was published in the New York Saturday Press. The work published was Jim Smiley and His Jumping Frog. In 1870, Mark Twain married Olivia Langdon and eventually settled in a home in Hartford, Connecticut in 1871. Their newborn son Langdon died in 1872. This was also the year their first daughter Susie was born. Their children, Clara and Jean, were born in 1874 and 1880. Mark Twain was most productive as a writer when his daughters were young. It was during this time that he wrote some of his most well-known works, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Prince and the Pauper, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Due to poor investments by 1890, Twain experienced severe financial issues. In order to relieve some economic stress, he traveled to Europe and did a world lecture tour. Sadly, not long after his return, his daughter Susie died, and shortly after Susie died, his wife died as well. Mark Twain took the blame for these tragedies and died at age 74 in his home in Connecticut. Mark Twain published a countless number of works, including books, short stories, and essays. The screen shows a list of some of his most notable books. Some of his best works of all time and my personal favorites include The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and The Tragedy of Putnam Wilson. In The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Tom is a disobedient orphan that lives with his aunt in St. Petersburg, Mississippi. As his punishment for skipping school, he has to wash fences, but he finds a way to make his friends do it for him. At school, Tom falls in love with a girl named Becky Thatcher, who happens to be the judge's daughter. They have a short relationship, and Tom is heartbroken when it does not work out. Later, Tom decides to sneak off to a graveyard with his friend Huck Finn, and they end up witnessing a murder. They run away to an island, but eventually return home when they find out that their community made funeral arrangements thinking that they were dead. Later on, Tom gets back with Becky, and Tom is going to court for the murder that he witnessed, but the murderer jumps out the court window. He eventually ends up encountering him during the summer when he goes to a haunted house with Huck Finn to find treasure. The story ends with Tom and Huck capturing gold and Tom wanting to be a robber. In The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Huck Finn runs away from his abusive father and fakes his death. He encounters a runaway slave named Jim, who is trying to get to the Free States. Huck reluctantly stays with Jim throughout his journey because he is a slave. On their journey, they encounter a duke and a king that end up selling Jim back into slavery, but Huck finds a way to help him escape. However, during the escape, Huck is shot, and since Jim does not leave him, he ends up back in slavery once again, but he is eventually set free by the end of the novel. In The Tragedy of Putnam Wilson, 3 stories are told. The story takes place in a Missouri town called Dawson's Landing around the 1800s. Putnam Wilson is a quirky lawyer that moves to his town for his career. In addition, there is a slave that is only 1/16% black and switches the identity of her son and her master's son so he'll live a better life, but this plan eventually backfires. Finally, there's a story of an Italian twins that move to Dawson's Landing and instantly become popular. All 3 of these stories come together in the ending. Mark Twain was most known for his sense of humor. He uses humor to accurately depict the problems in society. This is cleverly done in his well-known Tragedy of Putnam Wilson. He also contributed to society by accurately displaying the harsh treatment of slaves and African Americans. This is done in Adventures of Huckleberry Finn through the character Jim. Some people didn't like that he was so honest, but he just wanted people to know the reality of what was going on. In conclusion, Mark Twain was a remarkable writer whose stories will forever teach people the ways of society in the past.